All right, we are live. Welcome back, everyone. My name is Dominic Danino, aka Mr. Rento and Homes, and this is the Mr. Rento and Homes show. And in today's show, we're going to talk about does rent to own work for second homes or vacation properties? So that is the topic of the day. We're shifting a little bit from owner occupant into other other opportunities for you to monetize clients as the market shifts and potentially lenders get a little bit tighter on their criteria. So today I am joined by James Brown, real estate investor, real estate agent, with EXP in the Denver market. So welcome, James. Welcome back, bud.
Thanks, man. Glad to be on again. All good.
Yeah.
Moving to Colorado Springs pretty soon.
So all right.
Be doing both areas for people that know Colorado.
Cool. Yeah, right. I mean, and just because you're physically in one place doesn't mean we can't offer this service to others outside of your area, right? So we're multiple states, yep. And then within the state, I mean, once you're in the state, we could do it in any state, just about. Yep. So, and we have. So, to the topic at hand. So does rent to own? So if I'm an agent and I come to you, or I'm a potential buyer or a lender, and I come to you, James, and say, hey, can you do rent to own on a second home or vacation rentals? And why would you?
Yes, we can. Good show. See everybody next week.
Yeah, that's it. Simple answer. Yes. Okay. See ya. Next time, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. So can you run can you talk about a scenario where somebody wants a second home or vacation property, but for whatever reason they don't qualify, right? I can talk about it from a lender's perspective, but talk about the ones you may have run into.
Personally, haven't done any, but I know our partner Jesse, he's done that with a property in Florida, right? It was actually going to be, it was a short-term rental. And I don't know. I don't remember all the details of that. Do you remember?
Yeah. So we've done it in Texas, and then up north in our ski area, as you would say, right? In the skiing area up north, but also down in the Gulf Coast, and then down in Florida. Right, so we talked about vacation rentals or second home rentals. So I know Jesse's done them in St. Petersburg, right? And so and then in the Panhandle too, I've done. So I know during the Airbnb boom, this was a little bit more typical, more common, because a lot of people wanted to get into Airbnb, short-term rentals, right? And so that was the hot thing then, and the market was up from that standpoint, meaning there was demand for short-term rentals. That was the short-term rental boom, basically. And a lot of people were trying to qualify for a second home, right? And typically, most people don't realize when you qualify for a second home, you actually have to be able to qualify with two payments, meaning your primary residence payment and your second home or vacation home payment to get a second home loan. People were trying to do second home loans because on a second home loan, you can come in with as little as 10% down. Right? So people have 10% and say, yeah, I'm going to buy a second home and I'm going to run it as a short-term rental, right? And put it on the market and make some extra cash on the side and so forth. Mm-hmm. But most people's incomes typically don't qualify with two large payments, right? The primary residence and the second home, plus any consumer debt they may have, including car loans and so forth. So a lot of times they were getting turned down for second home loans. So then the next option is, well, maybe I can qualify for a loan that doesn't take into account my personal debts, right? And so that the next step becomes, okay, maybe I need to look for an investment loan property, investment loan type. On the agency side, they still count for your debts, but there are other programs out there. One of the typical ones is DSCR, right? Debt service coverage ratio loan, where they only account for what the potential cash flow is on that property from long-term market rents. Now, that's evolved a little bit, right? But initially, it was just, hey, what would the long-term market rents be for this property. And what the lenders are looking for is long-term market rents to support the payment that you have. However, on that loan, there isn't 10% down option, right? Minimum is 10. Some exceptions may be able to do. I know we have a couple of lenders that may do 15% down, but then the pricing gets really out of whack, right?
Yeah.
So once you start getting into that tier, it's an option. 2, you need to have really good credit. So some people don't have really good credit, right? And then also the pricing on the rates are a lot higher because there's a lot more risk, right? So you're not going to get the best rate, right? And you have to have the best credit. So again, people don't fit into that box. To have okay credit, you typically can do that with 20% down. And if your credit isn't okay, less than okay, then you're going to typically need 25%. And sometimes based on the interest rates, your actual payment, which includes not just principal and interest, but taxes, insurance, HOA potentially, and any additional assessments. It could have hurricane insurance because some places down in the Gulf Coast require hurricane insurance and so forth, right? So that payment has to be accounted for. So you still have to have at least a 1-to-1 ratio of market rents. And typically the market rents on long-term rents that are done by an appraiser they're going to use rents from the MLS, published rental properties that were on the MLS, because that's the data that they have. So if somebody on the block has a for rent sign on their yard or on their window, and they get a tenant to pay, I don't know, $3,000, but the only ones on the MLS were done for $2,000, that $3,000 one ain't going to show up on that report. Right? They're using MLS properties or MLS rentals, and typically they're going to be a little bit skewed towards the downside, right? So if your payment in this example, let's say the appraiser comes back and says, "Hey, the market rents for a property like this are $2,000, but your payment is greater than $2,000." Then the lender is going to say, it doesn't meet the criteria of 1-to-1. So you're under. So how can we get it to 1 or better? Is by putting more money down because you're financing less, right? Lesser you finance, the lower the payment. So you end up getting not into it for 15% or 20%. You end up getting closer to 22 to 25% down, right? So that's where we're at. And at the time, the rates were low, but the other issue was people were overbidding, right? Everybody was trying to buy rentals in the Smokies and Destin, Florida, and a lot of places like that. People out in Palm Springs and where Coachella is, out that way. So those were the super hot spots where people were trying to buy short-term rentals because, there's some people that teach the short-term rental method, and it's a great program. It's a great strategy, but what people didn't realize, they got themselves into trouble, is they were making anything and everything a short-term rental, right? So if they had a condo next to a Circle K, to the pawn shop, to the gas station, to the smoke shop, to the bail bondsman, they were calling everything Airbnb, right? Well, who the heck is going to go there for a vacation rental? Most of that came out because people were leaving states that were on lockdown. So that was the COVID effect of that, right? But now that that's been lifted, a lot of people that did that aren't getting the returns that they thought they were, and they also overpaid. So there's been a shift on Airbnb. So the key to running Airbnb and short-term rentals is the right location. Basically, places that have always been short-term rentals even before Airbnb became a thing. Right. Those communities are set for that because they get a lot of their revenue and a lot of their income, and their visitors are consistently for that purpose, right? So you run into less restrictions versus in places where it became a boom, and now cities are starting to place restrictions, and that's having an effect. So the key to it, though, is the right place, the right property, the right amenities. It can be done. So we did do some Airbnbs on those properties, and with that criteria, we knowing this and being in the industry and kind of being investors ourselves, we know where to kind of point people in the right direction versus, hey, you want to make anything an Airbnb? No, it's probably not going to work. It's not going to be a good idea, right? We can do second home or vacation rentals on rent to own for the right locations, the right properties, places that are consistently going to have that kind of demand rather than just some random location out in the middle of nowhere or in the random city, right? Random city, regular residence, residential neighborhood, right? That's not going to work. So there's been a shift with that, but definitely from a lender's perspective and also for us doing them from a rent-to-own perspective, it has to be the right location, right property, and so forth. So, but there's an ability for somebody to come in and say, hey, you know what? I only had the 10% down and I don't qualify with both my second home loan and my primary residence. So can I get into a rent to own? Yep, definitely could, because we've done it. So we basically have the rent to own person. We realize that they're going to run it as a business. And the goal there is so that they can claim that income, run it as an Airbnb for 2 years. That way they can claim that income, and you're supposed to claim that income. So that way you can go back to your lender and tally that income towards your W-2 income also. Now you have more income, which should help you in qualifying for both payments.
Yeah.
Right. And then at that point in time, then, you get your own loan and you go about your merry way and we get out of the picture.
Easy peasy.
Easy peasy, right? So there's a way. When there's a will, there's a way, right? But knowing some of these pitfalls and knowing, okay, what is the goal and how are we going to attack it and put the plan in place and execute on that plan. Everybody has to do their part. We'll do our part. They do their part, right? So the key with that is, hey, run it like a business, report the income. So that way, when you go back to a lender, the lender can count that income towards your total income and get you qualified.
Yeah. I love this show because there's so many things like this no one would ever even think about, It's a great way to get your investing journey going.
Yeah, definitely, right? And then, if we want to take it a step further, second home, vacation home, but some people are doing a couple of other investment methods that maybe they don't have all the money or they don't have the right credit. So I'm in another group that does midterm rentals.
Yeah.
Their strategy is midterm rentals. They're looking at locations that have hospitals or near hospitals for traveling nurses and corporate housing and so forth, right? Mm-hmm. Those strategies don't have to be at the beach, right? Those properties don't have to be at the beach. They're geared towards a particular location, right? So it takes some homework to do that, but could somebody do a rent to own on a midterm rental? Absolutely, right? Knowing what it is, knowing that, hey, you've done the homework, will help you with that and finding, hey, where are the best locations for this, right? But typically, if you're going to buy as a midterm rental, it's going to be an investment property, and the traditional lender is going to want 20 to 25% down. That's just the reality, right? Even if you can document all your income and so forth. And if this is your first time doing it, then obviously you don't have a history. Now, for more experienced people that, hey, I already got 1 or 2 or 3, then you're going to have some documented income too, but maybe you're tapped out of being able to put 20 or 25% down, right? So potentially rent to own could be the same thing, right? It's like, hey, we'll give you time to get your either financing right, your credit right, your income reporting correct, right? So that way you can go get your own financing in a couple years. So there's more ways to skin the cat, as we say. So those are a couple of the other ones. And then the more recent one that I've been working with, it's you and I talked about pad split, right? And for those who don't know pad split, and I'm gonna have one of the account executives for pad split here in the local market on one of my episodes on my podcast talk about pad split. So you want to talk about pad split?
I don't know much about it. I'd like to learn more, but my wheels are turning because, like I said, I'm moving to Colorado Springs and I'm thinking about some other options. And I was just on a call with a gal. She's also with EXP and was on a team with a guy that's built his business around helping people find rent by the room, pad split type properties as investments. So now I'm like, my light bulb is like bright.
Yep. Yeah. So for those of you who don't know what pad split is like the Airbnb, but this is for they call it co-living facilities or rent by the room, right? So some new strategy for investors is, hey, there's a shortage of housing, and prices for rents are higher than they've ever been, and some blue collar workers or people that are either just fresh out of college and just got their first job, right? Or entrepreneurs that are traveling to a location, or corporates that, hey, you know what? I don't need a full house to rent, but can I do just the room with a shower and a place to heat up my food? Because I'm not going to be in the house all day. I'm going to be out either meeting clients or at meetings, right? So, or at a conference. So rent by the room method, also, housing, co-housing basically at this point in time, right? So it's some kind of method that way. Pad split is one of the companies that is kind of promoting that method, and they have a platform where people can apply to either rent or put their property up to do by the room rentals. So they have a criteria for you to put a property up on there. Obviously they have some standards you got to meet as it relates to how many rooms, how much space, parking, and so forth, right? But yeah, that's gonna be there's gonna be a growth there, I think, because as we know, rents are going up. Rents continue to go up, right? So if we see rents going up, we see investors going to something, then there's something that's telling us that there's something happening here that requires there's a void in the market, and that's what happens, right? Investors come up with these creative ways to meet market demand, right? And this is at the very early stages. Now they are in, I think, almost like 15 markets currently, but it's going to continue growing because if I can rent by the room and say I pay $1,000 a month, but if a studio goes in my area for $1,800 to $2,000 a month, I may not be able to afford the $1,800 to $2,000 a month, right? But maybe can I afford $1,000 if I got a shower and a room and the TV and a place where I could put my food and heat up my food and so forth, right? While I'm working on whatever it is that I'm trying to get to, definitely, right? It's almost like it's almost like this strategy sort of works for student housing too, right? We have student housing, right? So I know where I'm at. So we're near the university, right? And there's a lot of rentals that are done for student housing, right? So typically it's done, hey, I got a 3-bedroom, 2-bath. You and 2 other friends of yours, guys can kind of like share in the cost of the rent, right? Split it up. And you each get 1 room and you share the bathrooms or whatever it is, or whoever gets the master bathroom pays a little bit more, right?
Yep.
But that's really no different now on the co-living or rent by the rooms. The strategy is to add additional rooms instead of just a 3-2. There's a conversion process that goes in. Hey, we're going to add additional bathrooms, potentially, or additional rooms. We're going to split up the house and add individual rooms to kind of meet the demand. So, yeah, that's a very creative way of generating additional revenue. Plus, you're just providing more housing, right? Because not everybody can afford a 1-bedroom or a studio apartment or a house for rent, right? So, and we know they're going to continue to be in a shortage because they're not building any more land. That's for sure, right? So, yeah.
This gets me thinking. I know a handful of guys that do sober living homes, basically group homes for people going through an alcohol treatment program or drug program or whatever. This would be a way to get somebody in that can't afford to go buy, because it's got to be a pretty large house, right? Especially for like the ones that I know that, like, I got a house for a buddy of mine who's an investor. It's run by Oxford House. They they kind of handle everything, all the lease agreements. They just basically use the house that the investor owns, right? So the investor's not actively trying to manage these people, right? But it's got to be a pretty large house where you can have at least 7 beds, 7 to 9 or 10 beds. So that's got to be a pretty good size house. So like in the Denver market, to find something that is that big, you're going to be paying $700,000 or more. You might not be able to handle that. So a rent to own.
And some of those aren't even converted to what it's needed to, right? So sometimes somebody's like, okay, we found the right house size wise, but we got to do the conversion. So there's additional funds that need to be put into the transaction or into the property to be able to convert it.
Yeah.
And then sober living facilities, I think it requires a license. So and you have to be approved by the state and so forth, right? So that one is close, but there's some regulation that comes along with that, right? So for us, from a rent-to-own perspective, we want something that somebody can exit in a couple of years on their own, right?
That's
so
true.
If somebody doesn't qualify on, say, a sober living facility, and can we do rent-to-own? Maybe. I guess depends on how much money they have, right? Could it be a whole that, hey, we're agreeing to keep this one for 10 years and we're going to give you 10 years to get this lined up, because you probably need a little bit more of a runway if you're going to apply that method. But generally, for us, or for me anyways, we're trying to keep it to something, hey, 2, 3, maybe 4 years tops, right? And so we want to know what the exit is, right? So typically on Airbnb short-term rentals, we can do that. Going to do mid-term rentals, we can do that because they can get financing on the DSCR or in some kind of investor loan. Pad split, same thing, right? From the sober living, I haven't done any. I know a couple of people that's their strategy, that we can kind of dive deeper into it at some point in time. But there's got to be an exit. I don't know if there's maybe some restrictions. I do have a lender as a broker that I am. I do have a lender that will do assisted living facility financing.
Yeah. No, some people that do assisted living here too. Again, it's nice to have a pretty large house for those.
Yeah, and that becomes more of a commercial loan than a residential loan, right? So different criteria, different standards, right? You're not going to get a Fannie Mae or an FHA loan for that.
Right. And I'm sure insurance is much higher.
Yeah, and they're probably going to need a little bit more down too. I don't think they're going to finance 90% or 15% down. They're probably going to need 25 to 30% anyway. So but there's potential there to be able to do something like that on rent to own, right? It's just going to be more specific to the details, the scenario, the individual that's doing it. Would I be reluctant to do it if this is their first time doing it? I probably would, right? Because I don't know that they know what the heck they're doing, right? There's higher risk involved with that. If somebody's more experienced that has 1 or 2 or 3 already, okay, yeah, at least I know what you're doing, and at least we can get those numbers and say, okay, what are your financials looking at? What kind of rate of return are you getting, or what are you running on your other ones? So at least we can kind of have a way to measure to see, hey, are you a viable person for this, right? So everything that we do, we want to qualify with the individual and the situation, so we can customize it for them. Because some Joe Schmo shows up and knocks on the door and says, "Yeah, I want a assisted living facility. Can you get me one?" Like, well, no, not necessarily. What do you got, right? What do you bring to the table, right? Yeah. It's not a one-way street. They got to bring something to the table that makes us want to say, yeah, okay, we'll take the risk on you, right? Because there is risk involved when we're taking on a property for somebody else.
Yeah, this reminds me of a gal that came to us and she wanted to set up something like that. She didn't have a job herself, no full-time, nothing going on. Her plan was to get a house, make it a group home type situation, and also earn income, like doing yoga retreats and some other things. But it was like, this is a totally unproven business model. So it was like,
Right. I mean, yeah. So somebody like that's like, okay, like it's just you're gonna start one. If you've never done it, how do we know you're gonna get income from it? Who are you gonna draw? Where's the business? I mean, you just got to look at it just like a bank would.
yeah,
Right. It's like, okay, what's your business plan? How many clients do you have? What are you projecting? What are you putting into the transaction? Right. What are you going to do for marketing? And all this stuff. Are you trained? Are you certified in some fashion form that makes you, somebody that's designated or qualified to do this?
yeah,
Right.
yeah. We like you said, we look at it like a bank, but we've got flexibility. Whether we say yay or nay is up to us, right? Whether
Absolutely.
we're
Yeah.
willing to take that extra risk, or
Yeah.
maybe we don't think there's any risk, but just the bank has their, they're not thinking about the business side that could potentially bring in income and cover the mortgage, right?
Yeah, traditional lenders are checking off boxes, basically, right? They're not looking at it because a lot of times the people that are making the decision on those loans aren't, right. They're working at a bank, making an hourly rate or a salary. They don't own a business. They've never run a business. They don't know how to analyze potentially somebody's income or how the sourcing is and so forth. They've never done anything like that. So how could we expect them to understand business owners, right?
Yep.
Or a business and how revenue is generated and what's actual real and what's paper losses.
Yeah.
Right. So, yeah. So we bring that experience to the table. So that's why we can kind of decipher what's real, what's not, and ask the right questions to get the right documentation and kind of make an assessment of risk as to, the individual and what their likelihood is of repayment, what their likelihood is of completion and getting their own financing too, not just payment, but hey, can you get your own financing in the end here, right? Because the goal is to get it in your name and your own financing, so that way we can get the heck out of the way and you go about your, you go about your business with it, right? So, yeah, that's important. And I think people that don't know how to do that, that are doing rent to own, we had that one scenario where an individual will try to wing it themselves and kind of got caught up in a bad spot because the person didn't give them enough time because they thought they were going to be able to do it. And that all of that comes with experience, right? And understanding, hey, it doesn't happen magically like you thought it would, right? So you got to give it a little bit of runway because people are people and they're going to screw up or something happens, life happens, right? So that's why we have these guardrails as to, okay, who's a good fit and who isn't.
Yeah.
Oh. All right. Anything else you want to add? Any other potential opportunities there for somebody that second home, vacation home? How about out of the country? Can we do rent to own home out of the country?
We could look at that. I haven't done it. What do you think about it?
Yeah, so there's some risk with that, right? Being able to get financing out of the country when you're not, when you're not a citizen of that country, it can be done depending on relationships and what kind of banks you work with and so forth, right? So we haven't done it, but potentially is that something down the road that we could do? I know a few banks that will lend in Mexico, and then there's some international banks that will lend in other countries too. But again, that it isn't going to be an FHA loan. It isn't going to be a conventional loan. It's not going to be a simple. Those banks where they're taking higher risk for out of the country and so forth, they're going to want more skin in the game, right? Because there's a risk. They may finance only 50% or 60%. So somebody wants it that bad. Hey, if you got the money, you can make it work, right? But it ain't going to be cheap, right? And it ain't going to be with the minimum, right?
Yeah.
So
to keep that,
glad you want it.
Keep that in mind. Like my business partner I run our EXP team with, she's from Mexico, and we're establishing relationships down there with a bunch of developers and agents, and so getting a network and some other countries because people want to invest down there.
Definitely, right? And so, yeah, you brought up EXP, right? So EXP has has a network of agents around the world in certain countries, right? So definitely, right? That's potentially reaching out and building those relationships if you want to go further outside of the U.S. Into Canada is pretty relatively easier now, but some other countries should probably be a little bit tougher. But definitely, as you part of being of an agent of EXP, can build those relationships and say, hey, what's it like to buy a property down there as an investor? What does it take? Is there financing? Are there banks? Will they lend to Americans or non-nationals of that country or whatever that may be, right? So there's got to be to it. There's got to be something to it.
Yeah. It's good to know you've got some lenders that'll do down there.
Yeah. So, and there are rules for if you're not a citizen of that country, whether you can own land or property, right? Each country has their own thing. So knowing some of those things, if somebody wants to invest out of the country, is important, and being able to network with people, boots on the ground, as we would say, right?
Yeah.
Is key to that. But for now, let's keep it to the U.S. But then as we move down the road, there's potentially opportunities, right? I was in Argentina like 3 years ago, and I saw a lot of potential down there. I saw Uruguay, I saw potential there. Then obviously Europe tends to be, right? So when I was in Spain and Portugal, that was big over there, right? Airbnbs were big out there, right? You had a lot of expats going there. They took their money during COVID, and they were going to places where they want to get away, or they got the opportunity to work from not the office. So they took off and went somewhere else, and either rented Airbnbs, or some that had money bought properties and started thinking, oh, well, am I just going to run it as an Airbnb? Now that becomes my business, and now I could just leave my job. So yeah. The opportunities and the creativity can be endless, right? It just takes a little bit of research, some work, and assessing the opportunities.
No.
All right. Any final thoughts? Any closing?
No. If somebody's got ideas that we haven't discussed here, let's chat about it.
How about land? Can we do land, like raw land development? Hey, I want to buy a piece of land, but for land, I have a lender that will do land with 40% down or 50% down. It's raw land, right? It requires some skin in the game, right? Because they don't know. And with them, it's okay, what are you going to do with this land?
Yeah.
Are you going to develop it, or are you just going to sit on it? What are you going to do, right? So there's got to be some thought with it, right? A lot of people say, oh, yeah, I'll just buy a piece of land and I'm just going to go ride my quad out there or whatever, or pitch a tent and camp out whenever I want to, whatever. Most lenders are gonna be okay with that, right? Yeah. They want something to be done with this. They want the land developed eventually, because they want value to be added to that land. They don't want to be stuck with land, because lenders like, I'm not gonna collect pieces of plots of land. What's the point of that? They're not in that business, right? No. And if you don't do anything with something like that, you actually have a plan to develop it. Eventually you're going to get tired of paying the property taxes and making those payments. You're going to let it go, right? That can get old, right? Because you're like, I'm only riding my quad up there, I don't know, 2 times a year, and I'm making this payment on this, and I got to pay property taxes on it, and it's going up or whatever, right? So that's why lenders are like, what are you going? I want to know what your plan is. Is there an exit to develop this property? Is this a piece of land that is it's infill, or it's near places where people are building, or is it just some random land out in the middle of nowhere, right? And there's really no chance of you getting any utilities out there, whether it's electric or water or anything like that. So yeah, but again, like I said, if you want it that bad, you got the money, hey, you can do it. It's just what's realistic too, right? You mentioned that individual that came to you and said, hey, yeah, I want to do this, and I want to start a yoga studio or whatever, teach it. It's like, okay, but have you done this before? What's your experience? Are you certified, or what do you bring to the table? Or are you just dreaming, right? Because it takes a lot more than just fake dreaming, as I like to call it.
Yeah.
Right. Let's be realistic when it comes to money and business. You got to be realistic too. You got to have a serious plan, not just some pipe dream, right?
Yeah.
All right. Well, that's all I got today. James, if people want to get a hold of you, how can they do that?
They can go to realhomesolutions.org or to my link tree /partner with James Brown.
Excellent. And for those of you that want to get a hold of me or more information on our rent to own program, go to our website. That's rent2ownhomesus.com. It's up top of the banner there on the YouTube channel, or in my bio. I am also on Instagram as Mr. Rent to Own Homes, YouTube as Mr. Rent to Own Homes, and TikTok as Mr. Rent to Own Homes. So if you want to get a hold of me, you could DM me there, or you can see my email address in my bio and my phone number there as well. Bye-bye.